Good Thursday morning and welcome back to Commentator's Corner. Tyler Reedy and Brennan Preisman with you for episode number 3. And Brennan, sports have ramped up big time over the last week. We've got a lot to talk about today.
We certainly do. This was supposed to be originally a 2-episode week. Unfortunately, the episode we recorded on Tuesday ended up never going out because the drive was corrupted or something. Yeah,
technology.
Technological difficulties, but we've got a lot of stuff to talk about today, so we're going to do that. We're going to talk about college football, a little bit about baseball. Your Royal Salvador Perez is making a case to be the home run champ this year. We got college football, obviously, week 1 in the books, and then we got some NFL week 1 and season previews. And, of course, we're going to talk about the Junior Jays. Big win last week against Papillion La Vista. Bigger game this week against Bellevue West.
Yeah, so today we'll run a little bit longer than usual, but we'll get everything covered for you. So starting with Creighton Prep football, last week Junior Jays were able to get themselves in the win column with a 30-3 victory over fellow unranked team Papillion La Vista, and it was a Shamar Brown game. Boy, was he something else, running the ball on the ground. 21 carries, 128 rushing yards, and a rushing touchdown where it looked like he was going to be down. I mean, he was almost parallel to the ground at the 2 or 3 yard line and just kept pushing and found his way into the end zone. So impressive game from Shamar Brown. Jack Pernicke was better, going 8 for 15 with 129 yards and a passing touchdown to Thomas Lydon. And their defense again, boy, they were shut down.
Yeah, they certainly were. I mean, that's what we've come to expect from them this year. Remember, they only allowed 16 total points to a West Side offense that did bring back its starting running back from a defending state title team. They also got a punt block return for a touchdown, and you mentioned Jack Pernicke. He looked really good throwing the ball, looked a lot more comfortable than he did in week 1. Marty Brown obviously had a great game. Even George Egan scored a touchdown, the junior fullback. He's proven to be a pretty key part of the offense through 2 weeks as well. But going up against Bell West, this is the team that feels that they, not West Side, should be the defending champs. And they were only a couple of plays away. They lost in the state semifinals to Kearney. That was a shocking loss as it was happening. I can remember telling people about it and them saying, "What?"
Yeah.
It was a 41-40 overtime loss, I believe, after they failed to get a 2-point conversion.
Yeah, I think how it went down. Bellevue West got a touchdown, kicked at the point, and then Kearney got its second, scored a touchdown, and then they went for 2 and ran some kind of like a double reverse and barely got to the pylon.
It worked. It was like that
crazy.
Central Michigan Hail Mary from a couple of years ago against Oklahoma State, where they barely made it to the pylon. But Bell West has come out of the gates firing. A 58-14 win over Burt to start the year, and then in their quote-unquote rivalry game, a 59-0 shellacking against Bellevue East. I just looked it up. That is the 3rd straight year that the Bell West Bell East game has been 55 points or more.
Oh my gosh.
It's been 59-0, 55-0, and 63-0 the last 3 years. I'm not sure you can call that a rivalry anymore, but this Thunderbirds team is talented. They've got 2 tight ends in the top 20 nationally for the class of 22. One of them, Micah Riley Ducker. He is going to be playing for Auburn next year, I believe. And then Caden Helms, also in the top 20 nationally, has verbally committed to Oklahoma. And they might not even be their team's best offensive players.
No, I mean, as far as yardage totals and touchdowns have gone, they haven't done a whole lot to start the season. I mean, granted, they probably haven't seen much playing time with the games being as blowout as they have. Yeah, but I mean, it's just, where do you start with that offense?
Probably L.J. Richardson. Yeah. Last year, he was on something else against Bellevue East. 227 yards and 4 touchdowns on, this is not a misprint, 9 carries. 9.
Wow. That's 25 yards per carry.
Yes, at least.
Oh, man.
So he is very good. They've got another senior at quarterback. That is Luke Johansen. He hasn't had to throw the ball too much, but when he has, he's been fairly efficient. He's already got 4 touchdowns this year. Threw 1 each to Riley Ducker and Helms, despite throwing just 9 passes against the Chieftains. So this is a very high-powered offense. And Prep's defense, which we've mentioned is very good, definitely has their work cut out for them.
Yeah, and Junior Jays are definitely going to have to try to come out, be able to run the ball like they did against Papillion La Vista last week, and just try to set the tone and keep at least the momentum and flow of the game more level, because if they come out and have a 3-and-out or have early penalties and give Bellevue West possession after possession, I don't care what defense you're throwing out there, even if it's as good as the Junior Jays, the Thunderbirds are probably going to run you through a wall with that offensive talent. So the game will be Friday night, 7 p.m. at Feynman Field down at Bellevue West. Highly encourage you to be there. If you can't, you can watch it on Bellevue West streaming service, which link will be put out for on the Creighton Prep Sports Network on Twitter. Brendan and I will have the call along with Meg Gross down at Bellevue West. So should be a fun game Friday night. Excited for it. See how the Junior Jays stack up against another tough opponent. So with that, we'll move it on to college football. Week 1 is in the books, and boy, it was some kind of week 1. Top teams playing each other. The Big Ten had some stacked games, starting with number 4, Ohio State, going to Minnesota and winning 45-31. Number 12, Wisconsin, fell at home to number 19, Penn State, 16-10. Number 1, Alabama, looks like it's going to be Bama versus the world again this year. They beat 14th-ranked Miami, Florida, 44-13, as Bryce Young, freshman quarterback, makes an early Heisman statement. And then another Big Ten matchup, number 18, Iowa beat number 17, Indiana, 34-6. A shocking score there. Hawkeyes looked great. Could be a big-time contender in the Big Ten West. Number 10, North Carolina was upset by Virginia Tech on the road, 17-10. And then Iowa State had a rough go of it. Number 17 in the country, only able to beat Northern Iowa, 16-10. Iowa State always seems to struggle in week 1. And then your Texas Longhorns, number 21 in the nation, beat number 23 Louisiana Lafayette 38-18 as Bijan Robinson looked great.
Hudson Card also looked good, freshman quarterback. Texas did actually have some trouble deciding who the starter was going to be. Casey Thompson played last year in the dominant Alamo Bowl victory over Colorado, looked really good in that game. I was under the impression he was going to be the starter, but Card apparently impressed the new coaching staff and Steve Sarkisian enough in summer camps that he earned the starting job, and he certainly looked capable of it. 38-18 win for the Longhorns. We got a game at Arkansas next week, an old Southwest Conference rivalry game, but should be interesting to see how far this Texas team can go.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely looked a little different than the past few years under their previous head coach,
Tom Herman.
Yep, Steve Sarkisian. Looks like he's got pretty good system going down there in Austin. So
it's amazing how when you have like a 5-star running back, could be a Heisman candidate, and you give him the ball, your team wins. That's just crazy to me. Who would have ever thought that could work?
Yep. So anyway, Texas gets the big win. They go on the road to Arkansas next week, and then the biggest matchup, just in terms of hype in week 1, was number 5 Georgia and number 3 Clemson playing on a neutral site in Charlotte, North Carolina, and Georgia beat Clemson by a whopping score of 10-3. Battle of the defenses, and Georgia's was able to get into the backfield frequently and sack Clemson quarterback DJ Uiagalelei again and again and again. So Clemson's got some things to clean up, but there's no doubt about it. They can still get into the playoff with just that one loss to what should be a top 4 Georgia team. But moving on, Washington, number 20 team in the country. Number 20 Washington lost to Montana 13-7. An FCS team went on the road and beat a top 20 team. So that was certainly interesting. And then number 16 LSU went on the road to a revamped UCLA squad, and the Bruins played a very, very impressive game behind their running game attack of Zach Charbonnet and Britton Brown.
They came on in their sissy blue shirts, and they certainly had a time of it.
Yep, UCLA winners 38-27. So aside from that Texas game we just talked about, and then another game we'll cover in just a moment, what game stood out to you from this week 1, Brendan?
Well, I would personally say, just based off of narratives that formed after the game, it would probably be LSU-UCLA. I know Penn State-Wisconsin had a lot of people talking about, boy, oh boy, how bad is Graham Mertz, which is fair because he looked awful. And I know Clemson-Georgia had a lot of people saying, oh, is Clemson's run of dominance done? The answer is no. They just faced probably the best defense in the country, and they looked bad because it's the best defense in the country. But LSU-UCLA has a lot of people wondering, is Coach Ed Orgeron, the Cajun legend, is he just the next Gene Chizik? And for those who don't know, Gene Chizik was the Auburn coach when a recruit by the name of Cam Newton came to town. Won the national title and was fired about 2 years later. The next year, with that's basically that same team, a couple of freshmen added. Gus Malzahn took that team to the national title game. So people are wondering, well, you had that undefeated year in 2019, but was that because you're a good coach or just because you had Joe Burrow on your team? Certainly a lot of questions for Ed Orgeron after Scott Frost was able to get a pretty nice win over Fordham. Orgeron's now the biggest name coach who's kind of on the hot seat.
Yep, so looking ahead to week 2, we've got less big-time matchups, but still a couple really big ones, starting with number 3 Ohio State hosting number 12 Oregon at 11 a.m. Central Time on Fox. It'll be Gus Johnson, Joel Klatt on the call, so certainly going to be an exciting one there. And then later on in the day, this is going to be the subject of College Game Day, Iowa State and Iowa. It's a 9 versus 10 matchup, the Cyhawk game at 3:30 p.m. on ABC. Chance for the Hawkeyes to build on the momentum they generated in last week's blowout over Indiana, against an Iowa State team that on paper is really good but struggled last week. So that's a big, big game over in the Hawkeye State. And then, as we said earlier, Texas going on the road to Arkansas. Texas only 4.5-point favorites, so could be a closer game than some people expect. That's a night game at 6 p.m. on ESPN.
And it's a rivalry game. It hasn't really been in the past couple of years, but Texas and Arkansas used to play every year in the old Southwest Conference and some of the Big 8. But those are two teams that really genuinely hate each other. On Twitter, I saw this sign outside of an Arkansas church that was like, football is only a temporary game. Eternal things are spiritual. Nevertheless, beat Texas. So there is definitely some hatred behind this game. It should be a highly charged atmosphere, and that'll be another test for Sarkisian, too. First away game as the Texas head coach, and it's a highly charged matchup. This could determine whether Texas's ceiling this year is 10-2, 11-1 with a New Year's Six game, or just 8-4 in a mid-tier bowl game again.
Yeah, so I hinted at earlier, we've got one more game to discuss from week 1, and Brendan, this game is the subject of...
What is happening?
And I was asking myself that a lot as a Notre Dame fan. So the Fighting Irish, number 9 team in the country at the time, went on the road to Tallahassee to take on the Seminoles of Florida State on Sunday night. Joe Tessitore was on the call, so I was getting... big-time flashbacks to that Texas game back in 2016. The Texas is back.
Did you just say the Texas game back?
Yeah, the Texas is back.
Texas is back?
Yeah, so,
maybe?
Going into that game, I had, some flashbacks and was, kind of concerned. But Fighting Irish came out, looked pretty good in the first quarter.
Jack Cohn looked great.
Yeah, opening drive, Jack Cohn went 4 for 4 through a 41-yard touchdown pass to Michael Mayer on a 4th down play. Then Florida State, after some early struggles, hit a couple big plays and ended up going up 14-7. Irish, though, were able to take a lead 17-14 into the halftime locker room. And then they traded some blows to open up the second half. Florida State got another long passing touchdown to take the lead, but then the Irish really took control and ended up leading 38-20 after the third quarter. And it was a pretty similar game script to a Notre Dame-Louisville game in Week 1 back in 2019. Teams kind of trading blows, Notre Dame sort of on the ropes early, but then taking control late. And I thought the Irish might be able to pull away with it and come away with a pretty comfortable win, but then the defense started sitting back a little bit too much, and Florida State just ran the ball, and before we knew it, it was 38-38, and then the game went to overtime. Florida State missed a field goal on their first drive, and Notre Dame's kicker Jonathan Dorr answered with a 41-yard make. And the Irish won it 41-38, but the storylines were not done there, as Irish head coach Brian Kelly, after the game, was asked about his thoughts on the team's performance, and he was attempting to at least somewhat quote former head coach John McKay, who, when asked about his team's execution, simply said, "I'm in favor of it." But Brian Kelly, when just asked about his team's performance, said, "I'm in favor of execution. Maybe our entire team should be executed after tonight." And he said all of that without a chuckle, with just a completely straight face. And obviously, the Twitter world and all of that completely blew up over it. And, after the game, Brian Kelly in his post-game press conference, was quick to just make a joke about it, say, it was just in joking spirits, and anybody who wants to take it seriously, can go to town with me on that. But boy, that Notre Dame Florida State game had a little bit of everything.
I mean, the craziest thing to me is that I don't think you even mentioned at all.
Mackenzie Milton.
Yeah, my favorite part of that game. Mackenzie Milton, the former UCF quarterback, did great things under Scott Frost and Josh Heupel, 2 consecutive unbeaten seasons, and then had that horrific leg injury in 2018, I believe it was. His doctors thought they might have to amputate his leg. He said, no, you're not doing that. And now he's back playing football again. Led a couple of those touchdown drives during the comeback and got the number 9 team in the country to overtime, coming back from a huge deficit. So good on him. I'm glad he's back, and I hope that he has as much success as he can possibly get.
So college football will keep rolling. Week 2 coming up this weekend, but also coming up tonight and going on into this weekend, the National Football League is back, the NFL. So let's get into our season predictions just as far as playoffs are concerned at least. And Brendan, we'll start with the AFC West, and I think this is a layup, quite frankly, at least in terms of the division winner. I got the Chiefs.
I got the Chargers. No, I'm just kidding. I got the Chiefs. But, the AFC West could be a fairly competitive division this year. I like the Broncos with Teddy Bridgewater. I think they're going to surprise some people this year and could get to about a 500 record. I think the Chargers, in their second year under Justin Herbert, they're going to be a playoff team. And if you like the Raiders with Derek Carr, you can never count the Raiders out because they're just a chaos team. Mm-hmm. You never know what they're going to do, but they're going to screw with something. So it's going to be an interesting division, but I still don't think anybody can stop Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs from taking another division crown.
Yeah, so similar to you, I've got Chiefs taking the division, Chargers in as a wild card team as well. I have Chiefs at 15-2, Chargers at 11-6. So then moving on to the AFC North, which I think is the strongest division in the AFC, no doubt about it. We could differ on this, but I've got the Ravens winning the division.
No, I like that. I like that.
Right? Yeah, I've got the Ravens at 14-3. If you look at their schedule, they've got basically all of their difficult games at home this year, which I think is going to play a big part. That defense will be strong again. I think Lamar Jackson has a bounce back year.
Yep.
Ravens win the division at 14-3. I got the Browns taking a wild card spot at 12-5.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Where do you have the Steelers and Bengals? Because I've seen a lot of predictions. For me personally, I think the Steelers could go anywhere from about 5-12 to 11-6.
I've got the Steelers at 10-7 or 11-6. Mm-hmm. I'll probably go with 10-7 on it, and then Bengals 4-13. Just the odd man out, losing a lot of division games because it's so strong. But Steelers with that defense, they always play well late in the season when it gets cold at Heinz Field.
Yes,
except for last year, but. I got the Steelers getting close to the playoffs, but probably being that first team out.
Yeah, that seems right.
So you got the Browns in the wild card as well?
I think I do. I don't really like it, but they've got far too much talent on that team to not make the playoffs. Now, I think they're going to implode as soon as they get to the playoffs, but they're going to be there.
All right. Despite the experience from last year, thinking of an implosion. So we'll see how it goes with the Browns.
It's the Browns.
Yep, so Browns have to have a big season in front of them, big expectations for them. But AFC East is next, and that's another pretty easy division.
That's a layup for the Bills.
Buffalo Bills. I have them at 14-3, just behind the Chiefs. And then I don't think the Dolphins are going to make the playoffs. I'm not 100% convinced that Tua is going to make that leap forward that everybody's hoping for.
What about the Patriots? Where do you have them?
I have Dolphins 8-9, Patriots 6-11.
Okay, so you are not a Mac Jones believer. Good to know. Good to know.
Not yet.
My bold AFC North AFC East prediction, is that Josh Allen's going to be the MVP.
I can see that.
I honestly think that right now the way things are going, unless Brady leads the Buccaneers to a 16-1 record or some quarterback that nobody's talking about comes out of nowhere, I really think it's Josh Allen's MVP to lose right now, especially if the Bills do as well as you think they're going to.
Yeah, absolutely, because the thing about Mahomes is he's got all the talent in the world and he's got a rebuilt offensive line, so the numbers should be better, but I think he's in less situations than Josh Allen where he's really got to push the pace downfield. I think Josh Allen can definitely put up bigger numbers, not only through the air, but also on the ground. So, Josh Allen, he's also at a point after last year where everybody knows his name.
Mm-hmm. And with Mahomes, he's kind of reached that LeBron James point where it's just yeah, we know you're the best player in the league, but you've already won a lot of awards. Let's give it to somebody else. You've won enough already. And that's crazy because he's only in, his fourth year as a starter?
Yep.
So, yeah, that's where Patrick Mahomes is. He's the LeBron of football. Starting year 4.
So then AFC South, I have the Tennessee Titans just barely winning that division over the Indianapolis Colts. I have them both finishing at 11-6, but
Yeah.
But, obviously I didn't go through all the tiebreakers. I think the Titans probably have a little bit of a higher chance to win that division. But Titans win the division. Colts get in as a wild card. I think the Jaguars have a slightly better year. I think they have a pretty good shot to get closer to 500 with Trevor Lawrence at the helm. I have them at 6-11, and then the Texans down at 3-14.
Oh, yeah, the Texans have a chance to win 0 games this year. That is a team in deep, 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 deep trouble. And they are not going to have things get any easier when they have to face Derrick Henry and a pretty solid Colts team with Phillip Rivers still there?
No, Wentz.
Oh, yeah, never. I don't like the Colts at 11-6.
Okay. I think they can ride their defense pretty well.
I originally thought that the Titans would be a wild card team, but then I realized that someone else would have to win that division. And I really don't see anyone doing that except for them. They've got Ryan Tannehill and Derrick Henry back. They've still got A.J. Brown. They added Julio Jones. They're going to have one of the most high-powered offenses in the league, I feel like.
Yeah, for sure. Moving on to the NFC West. This is, in my opinion, the most loaded division in football. And for me, it starts at the top with, not the Los Angeles Rams, but the Seattle Seahawks. I think Russell Wilson's going to have himself another good start to the season. I think he's going to sustain it for a longer period of time than he did last year. This might be a little lofty, but I have the Seahawks at 13-4.
I mean, if they do that, then Wilson might be the MVP because he's been one of those always the bridesmaid, never the bride guys when it comes to that MVP trophy. But if they go 13-4 and Pete Carroll lets Russ cook again, I think they win that division, yeah, and I think they've got a real chance at it. But the rest of the division, I mean, I've heard the Rams mentioned as Super Bowl contenders more so than any other team in the NFC except for the Buccaneers. The Cardinals are going to be back with Kyler Murray. Even the 49ers, they're only, 2 years removed from the Super Bowl? I mean, this is a division where you could say all 4 teams are going to make the playoffs. And it's the only division you could say that and no one would bat an eye because that is, I'd say, fairly likely. The only danger is, of course, with all those division games, there's going to be one team that ends up going something like 1-5 or 2-4 in the division, and that's going to kill their playoff hopes. And I think that's most likely to be the Cardinals.
Yeah, so I do have the Seahawks winning the division, and then Rams and Cardinals both picking up wild card spots. So certainly a loaded division, and then 49ers I don't have too far behind either, just a game below 500. So could be anybody's game in that NFC West. Moving on to the NFC North, with Aaron Rodgers coming back, I don't think the Packers are going to be dethroned in that division. I have them with a strong record of 14-3. And then Vikings, their schedule is tough. Their schedule is really, really tough, and I just don't know if, I'm at a point yet where I can put all my trust in Kirk Cousins, to win those tough games and, win those big-time games. I know it's a broken record, but I think the Vikings fall below 500. I think the Bears are slightly below them, and then the Lions, I think, are going to have a nasty year.
Yeah, my question is, do you think that the Bears' record this year is contingent on their starting quarterback? Do you think that Justin Fields gives the team a higher ceiling, or do you think that it doesn't really matter what the quarterback is and they're going to fall right around 500?
I think Justin Fields does give them a slightly higher ceiling. It's tough to tell right away how a guy is going to look. Obviously, Fields has that big game experience. I think they're going to get off to a rough start with Dalton at the helm. So, we don't know exactly how early Fields gets in. Let's say it's week 4. I bet the Bears will be probably 0-3, 0-4, 1-2, 1-3 by that point. And maybe Fields.
I like your scenario. I say the Bears start off 1-3. Fields comes in, becomes like a Chicago hero, the likes which we haven't really seen since like Jim McMahon. I would say Jay Cutler, except I didn't really like Jay Cutler, so I'm not going to say Jay Cutler. But I think that if Fields comes in by week 4 before Matt Nagy and Andy Dalton can do too much damage to this team, I think that the Bears could manage to get double-digit wins and make the playoffs.
Okay, all right. Only 3 years removed from that year where their defense was best in football and they ended up winning the NFC North. So.
And they did that with Mitch Trubisky.
Yeah, so see how Fields looks, once he gets in. We're all waiting for it. Same story with Trey Lance over in San Francisco. But moving on to the NFC East, I don't think this division is going to be quite as bad as it was last year. Last year it was historically bad, but I had the Cowboys winning at 10-7. Obviously, Dak Prescott is back. Everybody's talking about how Zeke is going to have a bounce-back year. They've got a pretty loaded receiving core with Amari Cooper, Michael Gallup, CeeDee Lamb. So Cowboys win that division. Then the Washington football team and Philadelphia Eagles, I have both at 7-10. Giants much further down at 3 or 4 wins maybe.
I don't know. I feel like the Washington football team is going to be a little bit better than people think they are. They've got Fitzmagic, and as we all know, he's basically a guaranteed 7 wins by himself. And then you add that incredible defense that they've got. Chase Young coming back. Jonathan Allen, I think, is still on the team. They've got a lot of really solid defensive players. I wouldn't be surprised if the football team managed to crack about 10 wins.
All right. Yeah, it's certainly possible. There are a lot of those close games that I feel like could go either way. Like, for example, I have them losing very close to the Chargers in week 1. That game could obviously be flipped. Maybe they pull an upset on Dallas at some point here and there. So, Washington, not an easy team to predict, but, the ceiling is certainly there with a much more stable quarterback position and the defense being, what it was last year, coming back once again this year. But then moving on to the NFC South, I think this is another pretty solid layup for division winner. Tampa Bay Buccaneers, reigning Super Bowl champs. I have them at 14-3.
Yeah.
Nobody's going anywhere. They're returning all their starters.
They're going to run through absolutely everybody this year, and I think 3 losses seems like a bit much, if I can be perfectly honest. And then, as if that wasn't enough, you add that to the fact that you take them out, and the NFC South might be one of the weakest divisions. The Saints no longer have Drew Brees, and maybe Jameis Winston has a great season, but he's going to have at least 2 games with 3 interceptions. That's like a guarantee by this point. The Falcons are Falcons, so they're not going anywhere. And the Panthers are still kind of stuck in the mud, rebuilding after losing Cam Newton a couple years ago. So there's a real chance that the Buccaneers get less than 2 losses, I think.
Yeah.
Like a real chance. It is not at all difficult for me to imagine a scenario where that happens.
Yeah, so, just thinking about these 2 teams that we've really highlighted as, above all else, might be on a crash course for yet another Buccaneers-Chiefs Super Bowl. That would be interesting, especially with that Chiefs rebuilt O-line. How would that game take place this year in L.A.? So, those are our predictions for the whole season. Now let's go through our predictions for Week 1, starting with tonight's game, the Dallas Cowboys at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Tampa Bay.
Tampa Bay will win. Yes,
Oh, yeah.
We know that, but I think it's going to be a little bit of a closer game than people think. I think Dallas is going to have a nice bounce-back year starting with tonight. And
I think the key here is going to be how good is Dak Prescott going to be returning from injury. If he manages to keep this game within like 10 points, he's basically going to have the comeback player of the year locked up, and Dallas is going to have the division title easily, like you said. If he doesn't play well, if he reverts to worse than he was before that injury, then I think that the NFC East will once again be wide open.
Yeah, so I have the Buccaneers winning that one as well. Something like 27-23, mid-20s, fairly close game, probably 1 possession. So I'll go with that. And then Falcons hosting the Eagles. This is really a coin flip for me, honestly, because, Eagles offense, we know about Jalen Hurts. He was pretty good at the end of last year, but, aside from him, it's Miles Sanders, maybe Zach Ertz, and
I do like Miles Sanders, but
else?
and then you look at the Falcons giving away Julio Jones, Calvin Ridley, and Kyle Pitts. I think this game, much like the Thursday night game, is contingent on one player, except for the Falcons. That one player is Kyle Pitts. If he's able to make an impact in his first game as the highest drafted tight end in NFL history, let's say 6 catches, 80 yards, and a score, then I think the Falcons are able to pull off a 28-24 victory. If he's not, I think the Falcons probably lose something like 21-13.
Yeah, so I have Falcons 27, Eagles 26. So close game, but I think Atlanta pulls it out. Next up should be a slightly easier one. Buffalo Bills hosting the Pittsburgh Steelers, and I think the Bills are going to pick up right where they left off last season with a 31-20 win over Pittsburgh.
I don't even think it's that close. I think it's going to be a tight game into halftime. It's going to be about 20-20. People talking about Ben Roethlisberger's renaissance year and what could be his last year in the NFL. And then in the second half, Josh Allen goes ballistic. I think the Bills end up winning something like 42-27, and Josh Allen makes a huge, huge MVP statement.
So next up, Vikings at the Bengals. And, I was pondering maybe giving Cincinnati an upset in this one. Sometimes they, play above expectations early on in the season, especially at home in front of that, packed stadium. But I think the Vikings will win it 26-23, and again, a closer game than people expect. We'll see how Kirk Cousins looks. We'll see how Justin Jefferson is in his sophomore season, if he can at least come close to repeating what he did rookie year. And then Dalvin Cook, who has really stepped up to become one of the top running backs in football. The Vikings offense could go full force against a pretty weak Cincinnati defense.
Yep. I think it's going to be about 23-14 Minnesota.
Okay.
I think the Bengals are going to take it a little conservatively in Joe Burrow's first game back, so I don't think the Bengals really have a chance in this.
So next up, Detroit Lions hosting the San Francisco 49ers. And as I mentioned earlier,
Detroit.
It's going to be a rough year for Detroit. Now, they do have at least one game every year, usually in September, early October, where they play at home and take one team down to the wire or upset them. They did it to the Chargers, beat them in 2019, almost beat the Chiefs in September of 2019. And they do something like that, it feels like, every year. So I think this could be a closer game than expected, but the 49ers win by maybe a touchdown or 10 points.
Yeah, I would.
Detroit's just not going to have a good year.
Yeah, I don't think that Detroit's going to do very well in this. And Jimmy Garoppolo, I know people keep talking about Trey Lance and how he might be the future of San Francisco. They're forgetting that Jimmy Garoppolo is 2 years removed from, 13-3 in a Super Bowl appearance? I mean, he is not by any means a bad quarterback, and I think he's going to be good enough at least for the first quarter or half or so of this season to keep the 49ers going strong, and I think he's going to do that against Detroit as well.
So then this next game is a big one, the Arizona Cardinals at the Tennessee Titans, and this is another one that could go either way. I have Arizona in a little bit of a shootout. Tennessee, Derrick Henry usually starts the season at a pretty high level, but doesn't really reach his full force until November, December. So I don't know.
Well, then it's a darn good thing Tennessee has A.J. Brown and Julio Jones.
But we saw with Tampa Bay last year, how well are these guys going to be meshed and have synergy right off the bat?
Well, except for Julio Jones, it's mostly the same core of returners, and I think that with Jones' talent, because he's probably the second or third most talented receiver in the NFL to come through in the past century, behind only Calvin Johnson and maybe Antonio Brown. I mean, I think that he's going to really help that Titans offense take to another level. I do like your shootout. I think 35-31 Titans.
Okay, I've got 31-27 Cardinals. So
you are wrong.
Seattle Seahawks at Indianapolis Colts. This one, surprisingly, was a little bit easy for me. Seattle's usually really, really good on the road early in the season. I think Russell Wilson throws at least 3 touchdown passes, and the Seahawks beat the Colts 31-24.
Yep, and Wentz throws a couple back-breaking interceptions. That's probably going to happen too, yeah. Colts are going to take a while to get going throughout the season. They've got a chance to make a playoff push, but it's not going to start week 1.
Chargers at the Washington football team. This is another one that I feel like could go either way. I might be a little partial here because Justin Herbert is my starting fantasy quarterback in one of my leagues. But I do have the Chargers winning a close one. I think the Chargers' playoff hopes are contingent on Justin Herbert and that offense pulling out some of those close games that they lost so many times last year. But I have the Chargers in this one.
I agree, but I think that's going to be because of their defense. It's going to be one of those close to scoregami games. There's going to be a lot of field goals. I'm going to make up a really fun score here. I've got 22-19 Los Angeles.
Okay. I've got 27-20. This next one, Carolina and the Jets. I have a pretty interesting score for that. I have 31-16 Panthers. I think could be a pretty sloppy game with the exception of Christian McCaffrey's presence, but I think the Panthers will come out looking pretty strong. That defense will be solid against Zach Wilson and that rebuilding Jets offense, making his debut. But Carolina in that one by a couple scores.
And who's the Panthers quarterback?
Darnold.
Oh, boy. Revenge game, baby.
Yep. So, next one, could go either way once again. Jacksonville Jaguars at Houston Texans.
I've got the Jaguars in this.
Okay.
I used to be a Texans fan, but that team has fallen off a cliff faster than just about any NFL team in recent history. The defense is collapsing. The offense is almost non-existent. And I think Trevor Lawrence is going to get a win in his first NFL start. I've got something like 27-14.
All right. I agree. I think it'll be probably within one possession, but we'll see how it goes. Could be a little rusty early on, but Next up,
Game of the week.
Miami Dolphins at New
Never
England
mind.
Patriots. Yeah, I'm looking at a slightly different order than
Yes,
you
you
are.
are.
But Miami Dolphins at New England Patriots, and Mac Jones making his debut. Battle of two Alabama quarterbacks, Mac Jones and Tua Tagovailoa. And I've got the Patriots in a low-scoring kind of field goal versus field goal type of battle.
Yeah.
I think the defenses are going to be the winners of the day in that one. But I've got New England 26, Miami 19.
I agree with that. Maybe scores a little bit lower, something like 24-17 or something like that. But that should be a close game where the offenses are kind of feeling themselves out. But should be an interesting one to watch.
All right, let's get to the game of the week now.
Let's
Chiefs
go.
and Browns at 3:25 p.m. on CBS. And Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid in September. That's all I'm going to say. I've got Kansas City 34-20.
That seems right. Yeah, Browns are maybe finally real contenders this year, but they are still not on the Chiefs level because almost no one in the NFL right now is on the Chiefs level. And I think the Chiefs are trying to show that Super Bowl loss to Tampa Bay was a complete fluke brought on by a mixture of a great defensive scheme and a non-existent offensive line, and I think they're going to come out firing.
Next up, Green Bay Packers at New Orleans Saints. However, due to the effects of Hurricane Ida, the game being played in Jacksonville, I've got the Packers beating the Saints probably by a touchdown to 10 points. Aaron Rodgers, Devontae Adams, I think they'll be hot right out of the gate. And it'll be interesting to see how Jameis Winston looks. New Orleans, obviously a playoff team last year and really perennial playoff team over the last few years. But Drew Brees is gone. Michael Thomas is hurt. So New Orleans is going to be an interesting thing to watch over the first few weeks to see if they can try to keep pace with Tampa Bay and maybe secure a wild card spot, but they're tested right out of the gate. I have Green Bay.
I do too. Yeah, I think it's going to be something like a 28-21 victory. The Packers are still the Packers, and the Saints, without Drew Brees, are no longer the Saints that we've known for the past decade or so. So, yeah, I've got the Packers winning that.
Broncos-Giants, another one that I feel like could go either way. You got two teams that have questionable quarterback situations. Teddy Bridgewater could be something interesting in Denver, and then Daniel Jones is still yet to even come close to live up to his draft pick for the Giants. I've got the Broncos 24-20 over New York. Obviously, we don't know exactly how many touches Saquon Barkley will get, but I've got Denver in a close one.
I think that depending on the amount of touches that Barkley gets, it's going to really decide the game. If he gets something like over 20 touches, I think the Giants are able to sneak out a close one, but if he doesn't, I don't think they will.
Next up is the Sunday night game, the Los Angeles Rams hosting the Chicago Bears, and I think it might be a good thing given this matchup that the Bears aren't playing Justin Fields in Week 1 because that Rams defense is tough.
Yeah,
I think they're going to hold the Bears to under 17 points.
Much like the Josh Allen game we talked about just a little bit ago, I think this is going to be the game where the Rams announce, hey, we're back. You should be scared of us. I think Matt Stafford is really going to help that offense. He's a far better quarterback than Jared Goff was, far better at throwing the ball and doing other quarterback things like winning football games and making the guys around him better. I think the Rams are going to take this one like 28-10, and I think that's really going to be an eye-opener for a lot of people around the league, just like, okay, we got to start taking these guys seriously.
Then to close it out, Monday Night Football. I love this matchup. I think this is the most underrated matchup of Week 1. Baltimore Ravens at Las Vegas Raiders, a game I feel like could easily be a shootout, kind of similar to what we saw with the Chiefs and Raiders in that Week 5 game. The Raiders upset KC last year. I've got Baltimore behind a Lamar Jackson bounce back, winning 33-27.
That sounds like a very fun game. Yeah. I would watch that. And yeah, the Raiders, the chaos team, they might not win a lot of games, but they're darn sure going to be good games. So, yeah, I've got nothing to disagree with about that prediction.
So, yep, should be a fun weekend starting Friday night with Creighton Prep and Bellevue West, continuing into Saturday with college football, and then even starting tonight, going into Sunday and Monday with the National Football League. Brendan, anything else before we sign off?
Not really. Just make sure you tune in to the Bell West broadcast to catch the Thunderbirds play the Junior Jays tomorrow night. We'll be there as the guest commentators, and we hope you'll listen and watch us, and have a great weekend.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for tuning into this week's edition of Commentator's Corner. We'll be back with at least one episode, maybe two, next week. Have a great weekend, everybody.